If you want to learn how to have better conversations when you're in conflict with somebody, this is the episode for you.
This episode is brought to you by Leapfrog Divorce, protecting your rights and providing solid legal counsel through one of life's most difficult and stressful situations and conversations. And as always, we're sponsored by the book Conversations, How to Manage Your Business Relationships One Conversation at a Time by yours truly, Ivan Farber. Conversations is available on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations About Conversations. On this show, we talk with movers, shakers, and difference makers about the conversations they lead in the world. Our guests are business leaders, authors, speakers, podcasters, YouTubers, coaches, divorce attorneys, and more. We're building a community of like-minded individuals who appreciate the importance of conversations and who want to lead others in big, meaningful conversations. Today's guest is AJ Grossman III, JD, LL.M, Esquire. AJ is the founder and CEO and attorney and mediator at Leapfrog Divorce, leapfrogdivorce.com. He's coming to us from Orlando, Florida. He's a YouTuber and a podcaster. His podcast is called Leap, Listen, Empathize, Affirm, Problem Solve. His mother was also a divorce lawyer, so perhaps it's genetic. And he says that he gets a deep fulfillment and satisfaction in helping people through the most stressful problems they will likely ever experience during a lifetime. Please help me welcome to Conversations About Conversations, AJ Grossman III, JD, LL.M, Esquire.
Ivan, thank you so much. I feel so blessed to be here with you today.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I must admit, when I told my wife I was going to be talking to a divorce attorney today, it got her attention.
I'm sure it did. Wow.
I want to give you, like I do all my guests, an opportunity to make an opening statement about who you are and what you stand for.
Okay. So I love that question because to me it's the big why question. You know, why do I do what I do? What's my purpose in life? It actually started at my mom's funeral. She died in a car accident in 1997. And I remember being at the church and a colleague of hers walked up to me and said, AJ, I don't know if you realize this, but one of the last things your mom did was she had a very long telephone call with me, didn't charge me for the phone call, that helped me in one of my divorce cases save a child from an abusive parent. And that statement never left me. And so when I was thinking about going to law school and becoming a lawyer, I thought, that's the kind of impact I want to have in the world. That's the kind of positive change I want to be at least partly responsible for. I want my work, my career to have that kind of meaning. And so what's funny is when I went to law school, I really had no intention of becoming a divorce lawyer. As a matter of fact, I wanted to do something else. But what I quickly found in helping people get divorced in the clinic at my law school was I really had some talent and skill that I was born with or that I developed, as a child and then later on. And I thought, wow, you know what? I think I've got to pay attention to this because this might be a niche or a niche for me where I can make a tremendous amount of difference versus, doing some other kind of law. So that's why I do what I do, to try and help families and minimize harm from a divorce and save every child I can.
You mentioned talent and skill. What specifically would you point to as the talent and skill that makes you successful in this position?
I really think it comes down to empathy and being able to connect with people on a human level to help them feel heard, understood, that they matter, that their perspectives and their feelings and their emotions matter. They're important. I think that's the key.
And you very clearly have a conversation model, which is one of the things that draws me to you and made me realize we're going to have a very productive conversation. So your conversation model is also the name of your podcast. LEAP, Listen, Empathize, Affirm, Problem Solve. I would love to learn more about your model, and then I would like to talk with you about my model too, but you're the guest, so I'll give you the first opportunity.
Okay, wow, love it. One of our core desires as human beings is to be seen, heard, validated, affirmed. And what's interesting to me in studying conflict is that so many times when somebody's in conflict with another person, it's almost like a volleyball match of accusations and defense. And there's never really an intent or a desire or an affirmative action to learn more about where the other person is coming from, to help give them a voice, to help them feel heard, maybe to help eliminate some assumptions. And so the listen part is so critical. It's building that bridge through listening. So the second part, empathy, it's really about connecting on an emotional level with somebody else. And it's so simple to do. Unfortunately, I think that many of us were never taught the skill of empathy. And it could come down, I'll give a couple of quick examples. If somebody is saying to me, I had a really hard day today because I just was not on my A game. I don't know what happened, but it was really difficult. The opportunity I have is, wow, that sounds really hard, right? Instead of what most people might do, or some people, and say, oh gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. Let me tell you about my day. You know, that's not empathy. That's not validating what somebody just shared with you. And so empathizing with people, building that emotional connection is absolutely critical. And then the A, affirm. I don't have to agree with everything that somebody says, but I can certainly affirm them and use empathy statements like, gosh, it sounded like that was really difficult. Or, gosh, I can't imagine what that must have felt like, right? It's affirming their experience instead of saying something like, oh, yeah, you know, I've been through that before. You just need to get over it and move on. That is not affirming. That's actually setting somebody aside and saying your perception doesn't matter because I know better. You just need to get over it. So affirmation is huge. And then the problem solving part. Wait for the other person to invite you to problem solve. You know, as men, we have this default of wanting to get in there with our tool belt and fix problems. And I know with my own wife, you know, sometimes she'll say to me, AJ, I just need you to listen. I don't need you to fix this for me. And it's so helpful for me because all I have to do is listen and empathize. I don't have to try and come up with a solution or fix it. And unfortunately, I think that's a lot of what men do and women as well, is we try and solve where we're not asked to. So when somebody asks me for help in solving a problem, I love to brainstorm with them and leave judgment out of it. This is their experience. They don't need me to tell them, oh, you did this wrong, or, oh, you never should have said that. And just leave the judgment out of it and just brainstorm, openly brainstorm with somebody. So that's what I try to do.
I'm left with the idea that you're pretty unique when it comes to divorce attorneys, and attorneys in general, or maybe even people in general, to have a conversation model, which is something that is part and parcel of my beliefs around my success. I work as a relationship manager in financial services. So I've evolved a very similar model. In fact, 3 of the letters in your listen, empathize, affirm overlap. And then I use resolve instead of problem solve. So we are almost entirely aligned. Your model, listen, empathize, affirm, problem solve. My model, create, listen and learn, explore, address, resolve. But as far as I'm concerned, you and I are like new best friends when it comes to conversation models because they're really overlap. The Venn diagram is very, very tight.
That's awesome. We need more of us out there.
Yeah. Now, on your website, you have a bold claim, and the bold claim is, "We do divorce better."
Mm.
My question to you is, how? How do you do divorce better?
Oh gosh, so many ways. I love that question. So the first one is caring about somebody's feelings and emotions. Many of my colleagues, other divorce lawyers, really tend to focus on the facts and the law. So here's a quick example. The other law firms that I've worked for, when they have a consultation with a potential new client, they will focus on getting factual information. For example, do you own or rent your home? Do you have any retirement accounts? How many cars do you have? What type are they? What year are they? How many children do you have? How old are they? Are they boys or are they girls? Do they go to public school or private school? Do you have any collections like art collections or coin collections or Hummel collections? And then what they'll do is they'll look at their laundry list of facts, and then they'll start talking about how the law may or may not apply to their specific factual situation. I am like 180 degrees different. And one of the first questions I ask is, tell me what's keeping you up at night? What's causing you to lose sleep? Right? And that's just such an open-ended question. They can talk about anything, and I'm good with them talking about anything. So typically what I'll hear is, gosh, I've tried to reconcile with my spouse. I've tried to get them to sit down with me and have a civil conversation, and they just won't do it. And I don't know what else to do. I feel like I've tried everything. And so, I'll ask follow-up questions like, what do you think your life might look like if you decide to do nothing about this situation and you just continue the way you are? How might that look like for you, right? So I get them to envision or picture what their life might look like if they don't get help. And then I might ask, if there was a movie running through your mind and it was a movie of your divorce and your future after divorce, tell me about that. What does it look like? You're the main character. What are you doing? What are you doing during the divorce? What are you doing after the divorce? What is your spouse doing during the divorce? What's happening with your children? How does your family look different? This is your chance to direct your own movie. What do you want it to look like? And those are questions that I have never heard any of my colleagues ask before. And so that's what makes me different. That's how I do divorce better, because when people work with me, they usually share with me something like, I am so glad I called you. You talked with me about things I haven't heard from any other lawyer before. Or, gosh, you know what? I really appreciate you respecting me as a human being. I called 3 or 4 or 5 other lawyers and they just treated me like a number. They gave me 15 or 20 minutes and said, okay, our time's up, we're done. So
Right.
that's just a quick example about how we do divorce better.
Well, what you're doing is you're doing conversations better.
Yes.
And that's my next question is, I imagine that conversations around getting a divorce are some of the most difficult conversations people will ever have.
Yes.
What are some of your top tips for how your clients can approach the tough conversations that they need to have?
Mm. The tough conversations are going to run the gamut or have various contexts. They might have to have a difficult conversation with their spouse. They might have to have what I would call a difficult conversation with their child or children, while at the same time trying to keep the children out of it as much as possible, because they just need to be kids. They don't need to be dragged into their parents' legal conflict. If a person I'm talking to needs to have a difficult conversation with their spouse, I will coach them on how to have that conversation. Again, something very, very, very different. And so I'll talk with them about what we talked about earlier. Approach the conversation with an invitation for your spouse. Tell them, we've been having some conflict between us. And I know that you have your perspective and I have my perspective. Before I share my perspective with you, I'd really love to hear how you see this conflict between us. And I don't want to put you on the spot. I'd like to invite you to that conversation. We could do it now if you'd like, if you're comfortable and you feel safe. Otherwise, let's schedule a time and maybe a location where you think we might be able to have that kind of a conversation. Would that be okay with you? Right? So you invite them, you check in with them instead of going straight to them and saying, you're a jerk because blah, blah. That's not going to get anybody anywhere. So that's how I coach my clients on how to have a difficult conversation with their spouse. How I coach my clients to have a difficult conversation with me is right from the get-go. I say, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to spend some time with me to talk about what will be probably the second most stressful life event you will ever experience right underneath the death of a loved one. And I want to let you know that this is a safe place. It's completely confidential. I'm not going to judge you. I'm simply going to listen and ask you some questions. And everything that we talk about is confidential, so I won't repeat it to anyone. So right from the very start, I'm trying to help them understand that this is a safe place where they can have those difficult conversations. And so throughout the conversation, if they share some information with me that I think, they're feeling very vulnerable about this, maybe a little shameful. And so the last thing I want to do is ever judge them. So I might just ask some questions to tease out more information. Like I might say, gosh, I can imagine that was really difficult for you to share with me today. Help me understand what you were feeling when that happened. Right? So it's almost like a therapy session, but I'm not a therapist and I never want to cross that line, right? So I walk very closely to that line. But so much of my conversation is very therapy-like, asking a lot of open-ended questions to help them feel safe and draw them out for these very difficult conversations.
You really do have a therapist type demeanor and bedside manner. One of the things you talk about on your YouTube channel is being the guy with the map and being the guide. And I was very interested to have you elaborate on that.
Okay, another wonderful question. I like to tell stories, and one of the stories I like to tell is, if you were going to climb a mountain, let's say Mount Everest, and you had never done it before, would you subscribe to the DIY culture and do it yourself? Figure out your own route, hire your own crew? Or would you rather hire a guide who's done it before, knows where all the pitfalls are, the routes not to take, knows who to hire for support crew and who not to hire? And divorce is very similar. Divorce is kind of like climbing Mount Everest. It's something that most people have never done before. They don't know what the landscape looks like. They don't know where the pitfalls are. They don't know the quickest, most efficient path from point A to point B is, point A being how to start a case and point B being finishing a case. And so that's one of the benefits that I provide as a experienced professional who does this for people day in and day out. I have the map. I have the guide to the Mount Everest of divorce.
I want to ask you a question that I'm afraid to ask you, because I don't know exactly why I'm afraid to ask you, but it's more personal. So you do divorce law, you do family law, AKA divorce law, and you yourself have been divorced.
That's right.
You talked about it on your website, actually. So maybe it's not so private or off limits because it's on your website. So you got divorced after 8 years. how does that help you help others?
I think it helps me in a lot of ways, because when I think about many of my colleagues and fellow students from law school, many of them were early 20s. They had never been married before. A lot of them had not had a career or a job outside of just going to school. And so when I thought about what makes me different, and I thought about my divorce, I thought, this is a way for me to connect with people and help them maybe trust me, maybe connect with me, see me more as like them. I've been through this before. I'm not talking off the top of my head. I've actually experienced this. And fortunately for me, my divorce was rather amicable. We were able to sit at a kitchen table with a pad of paper and a pen. Down one half of the paper was everything that she wanted, personal property, and everything on the right side of the paper was what I wanted. And we owned a home together, and there was equity in the home, and we both felt it was fair to split the equity. And so we were able to use a service that helped us get divorced. I went through the emotional pain. I went through, oh my gosh, what does this say about me? How does this impact my identity? Who am I now? The last 8 years I've been so-and-so's husband, right? We've been a couple. Who am I now as an individual? And so there's a lot of personal growth and personal challenges and morphing and transformation that people go through. And since I've been through it, I can empathize. I can truly empathize because I know what that feels like. So that's how it helps me. It really helps me connect with people going through this for the first time.
So EJ, you mentioned conflict resolution as a core thing. I'd love to hear more about your perspective on conflict resolution.
For me, conflict resolution comes down to learning where the other side is coming from, whether it's an international conflict, a family conflict, a workplace conflict, a conflict among friends. The starting point has to be, where is this other person coming from? We don't do a good job of teaching young people, number one, about effective interpersonal communication. And so where do most of us learn how to communicate with people? Usually from our parents, from our friends, from our neighbors. And unfortunately, what most of those people demonstrate is not a healthy way to manage conflict. And so I feel like we need this transformation in interpersonal communication, taking the focus from us or me to the you, the other person. Because when we focus on the me, I have assumptions about the other person, which may or may not be accurate. For example, I might assume that what this other person did was to hurt me. And if I start off a conversation with that other person and I say something like, what you did was crap. I can't believe you did that to me. That really hurt. You must think I'm this awful person to treat me that way. And if I'm wrong, my goodness, I just took a huge shovel, right, and digged a hole in the ground, and now I'm firmly planted in my position. Whereas if I had gone to that other person and said, I feel like we're not getting along, and that bothers me because I value your friendship, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, and I don't want to make any assumptions. So I really want to hear from you, if you're feeling the same way, that we have this conflict between us, where you think this may have started. What happened? I really want to hear from you before I share, my thoughts and my perspective with you. That other person might say, oh my gosh, I had no idea you were feeling that way. Tell me what I did, because I really don't know. right? So then now I have an opportunity to share with them my perception. They might say, again, I had no idea. And it gives them an opportunity to apologize and say something like, I am so sorry that when I did XYZ, that caused you to feel that way. I'll never do that again, I promise you. Right? And so isn't that a healthier, more productive way to do it than to do what we typically do and take these very firm positions and assume we know everything about the other person's feelings and emotions and intentions and just come out swinging? It just doesn't make sense.
As part of the closing statement, AJ, what would you like people to do as a result of listening to this conversation?
I would love people to learn more about how they can take control over their own situations in conflict. I would love for them to pick up a book, and there are a ton of them out there. One of my favorites is called Difficult Conversations. It was written by a group up at Harvard many years ago, and it's a great practical guide on how to have difficult conversations with people. It's a relatively short book. Again, it's very practical. People can put their tips and techniques into practice right away. And I think that by learning more about what we say and how we say it and how we treat other people in conflict can make huge positive strides into that transformation I'm talking about in interpersonal communication and conflict. So just take some time to learn a little bit about it and how you can do it better.
AJ, I appreciate you being here with me today. As a thank you for being on the show, I'm going to send you a copy of my book,
Oh,
and I'm happy to do that. I want to make a few closing comments. Number one, I really enjoyed getting to know you both in this live conversation, but one of the magic of having a podcast, having content on YouTube, is people can really get to know you before they talk to you live. And it's a really strange experience, but it's part of our modern world that we can get to know people if they have the courage to be self-expressed and put themselves on video in front of everybody. And you do it in a very comfortable way that I really felt like I knew you even before we had a chance to talk live. So I want to acknowledge you for that courage. I know what it takes to have that courage. I would acknowledge you for the clarity with which you approach conversations. I want to tell you that I'm on a mission to actually create a place of, it could be higher learning, it could be even elementary learning, for people to actually learn about conversations such that it isn't just your parents, because your parents could be really bad at having conversations. It isn't just by trial and error. It's really about people who care about conversations. Conversations are the very essence of how we get what we need or want in the world. They're at the essence of our relationships. They're at the essence of the businesses we're building, the endeavors we're leading. So I'm currently building a community that I call the Conversations Community, which I welcome you into, on the path to creating an academy, and that I'll actually need teachers like, hopefully you could be a part of the faculty for the academy, where we teach things that are practical. Like, what if we had a class? There probably isn't a class in any school anywhere that is how not to get divorced. Or
yeah.
for that matter, a class that says how to get divorced,
Mm.
because those are all based on conversation. So I'm going to share my book with you. I'm going to give that to you. I want to invite all the loyal listeners to the show to reach out to me, to let me know that you're there, that you're a part of this community. As an incentive for a limited time, I'm happy to give you a free copy of my book as well. I want to get the information out there. I want to make a difference. And with that, AJ Grossman III, JD, LL.M, Esquire, and everybody out there, I want to thank you for being a part of this conversation about conversations.
Thank you, Ivan. It's been a wonderful opportunity to talk with you.